Hi, Ire.
Hi.
So in the previous video, we talked about accessibility, like why is it important and who exactly is it for? Like, is it like only for very disabled people, let's say, or for everyone? And like how you can work on it. So I read that like there's some kind of framework that like is interesting to see to get to have like an idea of how accessible your website is. So I saw that you define it in like different categories like perceivable, understandable, operable, and robust. So I would be interested like if we could define all of these different like items, and if we could give like examples or ideas on how to improve each or our accessibility test on each of these metrics. So first, like perceivable, what is perceivable?
Okay, yeah, I'll have to like
I kind of remember so many.
everything off the top of my head, but I believe perceivable was about making sure that like elements on the page are able to be like seen and interacted with. So I think this is where stuff like color contrast and stuff comes into play. And I think a really good tool for this is if I can remember the particular name, but maybe I can like send you the link later or something. But there's a particular Chrome extension I was using, which will allow you to simulate different visual maybe disabilities or just the different ways that I guess people can see this. So you can simulate like really low vision or different. You can actually also simulate different types of visual disorders, which is really interesting. And and just making sure that your website like holds up in all these different scenarios.
And so you see them as they would be seen by someone who has like this disability.
Exactly.
Okay.
And like I mentioned in the previous video about how it's not even necessarily only for people who have one of these disabilities. You can think about, okay, you're like outside in the sun and you're trying to view a website. That's an example of, you probably want to test to make sure that your colors hold up for a situation like that. So I would say that's what perceivable is about.
Okay. And does it work also because I saw there's like a big discussions lately about people using important and like forcing some kind of I don't know, like for instance the size of the text.
Yeah.
Does it fall into this, like also make people that don't see well be able to make the font bigger, things like that?
Yeah. I don't know if this is necessarily the same, but there's also in your head, there's like a specific meta tag that you can specify. The one that usually says something like, the viewport one, where it says like width equals device width, min scale, something. But you can also stop people from like zooming in or zooming out using that particular viewport query. And that's also a really big no-no, because maybe you set your font size to be this, but as a user I might know that I need to like have it bigger, so I might want to zoom in, and then you've stopped me from zooming in because you don't necessarily like the way it looks that way or something. But for me, I know I need it, right?
Otherwise I would not even be able to read. So it's no longer a matter of design, it's more of understanding.
So not doing things like that where you're stopping the end user from making whatever changes they need to do to be able to actually properly use your site.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so it falls a bit like I think that it's closer to also to understandable, like being able to like access this info but also understand it. For instance, having content in different languages, is it something that falls into this understandable part?
Yeah, I think that would also be for I think it's also more about the content, I guess.
Yes.
And like I think I mentioned before, kind of guiding the user in how to like use your website. So I think an example that I give is, for example, when someone is trying to sign up for your website and then they need to create a password, right? And that's usually something that it can be very wrong or it can be very right, the experience. And you don't want to have the person, fill out this whole form, then click submit, and then they say, oh, your password needs to contain 10 acrylic letters or I don't know, something crazy. And it's just like, well, you can have a better experience, and that's like guide the person as they're interacting with your
it.
site more.
Okay.
Yeah.
And like also something that I noticed, and maybe more people are doing it, is the fact that for some countries people didn't speak English at all.
Yeah.
And I see that more and more people are making the effort to like translate their website, or like at least I saw that there's also like this Chrome extension that allows you to translate it at least, because if I open a website in Russian I would anything, for instance. So I guess this is also something that is happening today, like having more content in your own language, even if it's not perfect, at least you can understand part of it.
Yeah, I've been using that here because so many websites are like just in French, and I'm just like, I don't know what to do. And then Google saves me with my translating.
That's a big
and like
thing.
you said, even if it's not perfect, at least you get an idea of what's going on.
And so there's this, but this is more like for everyone, like to be able to understand what's going on. There's also like what you said about in a previous video, people who don't understand colors and don't know what's going on. So this idea that the website needs to be we need to be able to use the website and to operate or interact with it with different with different disabilities, also the different knowledge. So do you have any like advices you could give to someone about this, like making your website more operable or more easy to use?
Yeah, so this one is a lot about like semantics, I would say, and making sure that you are actually using the right elements for things. So if there's a button, like I say, like use an actual button, because if somebody is interacting with their keyboard, not even necessarily a screen reader, like just using their keyboard, it's going to have, there's so many built-in functionality to that button that if you use a div, it's just completely lost, and somebody will not be able to even access it at all until you go in, unless you go back and like, okay, I'm gonna add the tab index, then I'm gonna add like a handler for like when somebody presses enter on it versus like tab and all of that. And I always like to say, like, at that point, like, why don't you just use the button? Like, what are you gaining from using a div instead? I'm making sure that form elements in particular, or just anything interactive, is like properly labeled. So having an input without a label is just like somebody that might be using a screen reader just doesn't know what this is. And like I also mentioned in the previous video, how all these companies might be losing so much money because people can't even like check out on their website, and it's like just adding stuff like a label and things like that will go such a long way to make it actually usable and operable by people.
And the tool that you mentioned, it allows you like flag these items, like you didn't put a label here?
Yeah, so the Pally tool that I mentioned, it will see if there's any element that doesn't have like a label, or if you're using, or if like you have a form but it doesn't have like a submit button or things like that. So
okay. So like this would be like a good way to like review all of these different items. Okay. And the last one that I saw is robust. So making your website robust, whether is it more something about performance or like browser support, things like that?
It's more about just adapting to the standards. So when something is robust, it's like, I guess what you said is correct, and like working in as many different devices as possible, but it's more about like just doing things the way it's kind of meant to be, so that in the future when things are changing, it will probably be more likely to hold up because it is done like the semantic way. So there are things like I think it's called the HTML validator, that you can just put in your URL and it'll make sure that you're using, like, your HTML is actually valid. Because as we know, like, you can write something that's not valid HTML and nothing will happen. It'll still be there, right? So this is like a way to make sure that you're actually writing valid HTML. You're not just like making up random things, and it's going to be way more likely to hold up in the future.
And if it doesn't hold up in the future, is there a way like to get like a notification about, you see there's this new version of a browser, or this new improvements, and you're no longer like robust, let's say?
I don't think there's anything automated for that at the moment. I mean, if it's a website that you're currently working on, I would just recommend regularly doing these checks to make sure that it still holds up. But the good thing about HTML and the web in general is that things are almost always backwards compatible. So as long as something works today, it is very likely to work in like 100 years or whatever. And that's what's really great, and that's why being robust and actually being valid is great, because it's not like building a native application, like, because you can build an iOS app today and then tomorrow it's like off the app store because Apple changed something and they decided that the way you wrote it is no longer valid. But luckily that doesn't really happen to us. So like I said, if you write something good today, then you can just be like comfortable in the knowledge that it will work, even if it's not like the best thing in 100 years. At least it will work. It will open up in that browser.
Okay, so it's more like generally all of these things that we talked about, it's more something that you do at the beginning, from the beginning, while you're building your website. Maybe you'll have some small improvements to make, like while it's like living.
Yeah.
But it's something that, like, if you take care of, like, from the beginning, you should be good to go on accessibility.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.